And let's be clear, what is going on in Gaza today is a man-made crisis. This is not a natural disaster. This is not climate change. This is a man-made crisis taking place right now. And it is the direct result of choices made by political leaders, none more than Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel's extreme right-wing government.
My name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? All right, welcome back to another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH, I am your host, Richard Dix here, and we're going to talk about the Israel-Hamas conflict. This is part 4 of this particular series. We missed you last week. I was trying to get some stuff together, and I realized that I just didn't have the episode where I wanted it to be. And I just was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a week, and we'll figure it out. And I hope that we did. But before we get to that, let's see if there's anything else we want to cover here. A little bit of housekeeping. What am I watching? I don't know if I covered this before. I'm not sure if I have. But I just watched The Blue Beetle. I think because I watched it and I think I fell asleep. So I might have mentioned it, but I actually watched it this time. It's pretty good. Not great. We're not going to give it that label. But I thought it was cool that, they gave Latinos like their own superhero. The same way they did with like black people in like Wakanda and like Black Panther. You know what I mean? Like I guess, but I don't know. It was different and then not really quite, the same and kind of long, to be honest. A little bit, could have been like 25 minutes shorter. But George Lopez is in there. He's really funny. Susan Sarandon is in there. She's pretty good. And then as far as what am I reading, I'm still reading The Alter Ego Effect, which I don't know if you've heard of that. That is it's about creating another like version of you, not like a schizophrenic idea, but like a version of you that's like would do the things that regular you would never do. Right, and I guess I'm not quite explaining it right. This is the guy who wrote it is the same guy who helped Kobe Bryant create his persona, the Black Mamba, right? And the idea being that the Black Mamba is like this. He's just this assassin. He goes after people. He don't care about nobody, and he's just about winning, stuff like all that. And outside of Kobe Bryant, he's that person, or inside. I mean, not outside, but yeah. And so he adapts that to all different types of living and working. You can use that, in any part of your life. You can make a person who is, I don't know, that you can kind of go to your alter ego who can help you through different problems. And you give them a name, and they have like not a backstory, but they just, they have like a kind of a vibe and a tone. You know what I mean? May not be explaining it that well, but it's a pretty good book. And as always, you can find all the extras over at htthappen.com. See, all the socials are at htthappen, except for the TikTok, which is at htthappen22. And like I've been saying with the bite-sized bios, we are now going to be covering the 27 Club. And so that we've already had our first one, which was Janis Joplin on the last BSB, and the next one's going to be Jimi Hendrix. We're going to cover him. We're going to try to get down to the nitty-gritty and find out why these people, kind of kicked the bucket at that time. It's very because what I found when I did the little bit of research that I've done so far is that it's, like I thought it was just like, like Kurt Cobain and Amy Winehouse and stuff like that, but it goes back to like the 1800s, and like evidently artists have been dying at 27 since like the mid 1800s, and so we're gonna get into some of those guys too. But yeah, so catch those. That's every other week. Basically, every other Monday we do a bite-sized bio, and every other Monday we do a HDTH. Don't think there's much else to say before we get down to it. Of course, if you're listening to this and you like it, give us 5 stars wherever you're listening to this. If you didn't like it, give us 2 stars. Tell us why you didn't like it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. But yeah, without further ado, as we know to do, here is the episode.
To ask those who used to speak about human rights, where is this human rights there in this house? Did you see the picture there? Our camps, Lebanese villages who had been smashed completely, some of these villages had been smashed with Phantom, with Skyhawk, with Mirage, with F-15. with cancer bomb, with lance rocket, with the Navy. Civilian war, yes, because it is your baby who did it. It is Israel who did it.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start right around where we ended on part 3, which would be in the late 80s, right around 87 or so. We've just seen Hamas be created. You know, they were initially a religious organization that was charitable, helped the people of Palestine, and they turned throughout the years and became a terrorist organization. We're going to see right around 1987 begins what's called the First Intifada. There would be 2 intifadas, and basically the Intifada is a version of an uprising. And what the best way I can describe it, as what I've seen, is basically the Palestinians at that point had kind of there's a lot of parallels and similarities to the Intifadas and these civil rights movements that happened in America. Because what you find is that you have a people, right, a certain subsect of the population has been kind of relegated to this certain way of life, right? This is what you're allowed to do. This is what we will allow you to do. Don't step out of line. Don't try to have ambition. You know, just do what we allow you to do, and everything will be fine. And that you find that that's cool for a while, right? Because what we see is after these Arab-Israeli wars, the Palestinians start to come and work in Israel, right? And they what they do is they take up about, I don't know, at least 40% of the workforce, I would say. And what that workforce is all the layman jobs, you know, all the stuff the Israelis don't want to do. And so that's what we find the same thing in the civil rights movement. You find the black people and the brown people of that time were doing all the stuff that the white people didn't want to do. You know, they were on the backs of the garbage trucks. They were maids, right? They were doing all that stuff that was deemed inferior in some capacity. And what happens in the late 80s is they get tired of it, right? And so they start having these uprisings, these protests. They go back and forth with the Israelis, and a lot of people get killed. Specifically, I think about 142 Palestinians are killed during this time. It's about a 6-year period, and this is an interesting time. I feel like it's always an interesting time for this area of the world, because they just seem to always go from conflict to conflict. As you've seen, we've covered this area now, and we're now in part 4. We've gone back at least 1,000 years, and it seems like they never stop fighting. It just seems like they just go on and on and on. But so we're here now in the early 90s, and what happens is we get the Oslo Accords, right? They happen in, I believe, it's 93. And what's interesting about the Oslo Accords and why they're called the Oslo Accords is because they happen in Norway, right? And I don't know, I never really thought too deep about it, but I was like, why is it in Norway, right? It's a kind of a random spot for it to be, because I mean, not gonna, spoiler alert, the Oslo II Accords happen in Egypt, right? That makes sense. It's right beside it. It's like, yeah, we'll just step over here and get this done, and then we'll go back to what we're doing. But they got to go all the way to Norway to do this, and I watched some documentaries about it, and they kind of explained it. So basically, Norway had basically like some business interests in Israel, like so much so that they had their own political factions within whatever Israel's equivalent to Congress is. I'm not sure what it is off the top of my head, but their actual, their governing body, because they're set up a lot like European governments are set up, which is what I truthfully think that we need in America. It'd be interesting to see what would happen. It's like if you look at like Parliament and other like it's like congressional equivalents in Europe, what you find is they have a plethora of political parties, not just 2. Like there'll be like 10, right? 12 in some cases. And they all believe these different things, and they're all battling for power within that, right? And then the majority still wins out. So you think, oh, all of a sudden we'd have all these crazy left or right leaning ideals that would then become mainstream. That doesn't seem to be the case, because the majority still wins. Level-headed people still seem to prevail in most cases. But you still give those dark corners of society, you still give them a voice. Like I learned last night, I'm not even going to lie, that there are actual Arab factions in the Israel Congress. Let's look it up, because I keep saying Congress, and I want to know, I've said it a couple times now, what is Israel's version of Congress? The Knesset. Okay, not pronouncing that right for sure. But yeah, it's a parliamentary democracy. But I said that to say one of the parties in there was the Norwegian Labour Party, and the people that are in that party are the ones that actually orchestrated the secret meetings between the PLO and Israel, specifically Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat. Because Yasser Arafat, as I mentioned in the last episodes, he would become the face of, I would say, definitely Palestine, but to me, he became the face of a somewhat peaceful Middle East. Because, like I said, when I was a kid, I couldn't understand. I mean, to fully just make it as general as possible. As an American Christian kid, I couldn't understand why all of these people who are wearing these things on their heads, right? But why they hate those guys, but they don't hate them as much over here, though. You know what I mean? I really couldn't figure it out. And this puts a lot of faces to names and puts a lot of causes, and explains them. At least to me. I hope it does to you. So yeah, that's the Oslo Accords. So what they were trying to do with that was, and this is interesting because what you find with a lot of the agreements that you have throughout these years is never to really give Palestine their own state. It's more about giving them power to govern themselves. Because truthfully, since 1947, Palestine really hasn't been a state. That's why I think people don't even realize what they hear when they hear it on TV. These people have been living in refugee camps for 70 years. What other, where else does that happen? Like literally, I think they gloss over all of the different ways that you can look at, because I've heard people say, and it makes a lot more sense to me when you think about it, is that Israel is truthfully occupying Palestine is really what's happening. Like they're not really, they're not, they've already, I don't know, I guess they've taken it over to a degree. They control it, right? They don't really want anything to do with it, but they control it. And that's kind of been the main issue. But back to what the Oslo Accords were trying to do, they were, more to my point, they were trying to give them a government, right? And let them have their own, light companies and stuff. And I mean, have the stuff that you need to be a real society. And the idea is if you do that for 5 years, then we'll talk about, they treat them like a child. Like these are people. You know what I mean? But in 5 years, if you still have a good government, we'll talk about maybe you can be your own country. Maybe we can take those training wheels off Palestine. All right, we'll get back to it, buddy. And that's and then basically it doesn't happen, right? And what's wild about this is they give these guys the Nobel Peace Prize for this. Yeah, they give them the Nobel Peace Prize. And if you're counting at home, your little game of Israel-Hamas bingo or what have you, that's 2 Nobel Peace Prizes, 0 peace in this entire conflict, because they gave them a Nobel Peace Prize for the Camp David Accords as well, which were, 16 years prior to that, and have proven to also be unsuccessful. But they're just so quick to give out these prizes for these men who are just doing so much for the world. I don't know. So the 90s would continue to be tumultuous for this entire conflict. I believe it was in 95, the Prime Minister of Israel is assassinated. So yes, the man who had just received the Nobel Peace Prize 2 years before was gunned down, and he was actually killed because of his stance on the Oslo Accords by a man named Yigal Amir. Yigal is Yigal. I feel like Yigal sounds way more regal, but it could be Yigal. So yeah, and that's what we've shown throughout this entire time. It's like violence goes back and forth. It really does. I mean, you in the first Intifada, of course, no Israelis died, but they come back a couple years later and they basically kill your king. If this were chess, you still wouldn't win because you have to get the queen, but still, it's be a pretty interesting, it's a pretty serious move. But we'll move forward, a little bit forward, because what I want to get to a little bit, and what we're actually going to try to cover today, is a little bit of the actual what's going on right now. We're just going to talk about, some things, because I feel like now it's turned into, at least for people who are not, in the war zone, it's a conversation worth having, and I was listening to Senator Bernie Sanders speak.
Madam President, let me try to provide a picture, a snapshot of what life in Gaza is like today. More than 25,000 Palestinians have been killed in this war so far. And remember, the population of Gaza is just a bit over 2 million. 25,000 are dead already. 62,000 have been wounded. 70% of the dead are women and children. 70% of the dead are women and children. At least 210 Palestinians have been killed in the last 24 hours. Overall, 152 United Nations aid workers have been killed so far, more UN losses than in any previous war.
The whole point of it is, how did it happen? But since it is still happening, we may as well discuss the atrocities and just the way that it's very interesting, just the way that all this is played out. Even down to the fact that what Israel's taken to the International Court of Justice.
In the court's view, at least some.
This is Joan Donahue. She is the head of the International Court of Justice. She also used to work in the Obama administration.
Of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the Convention. In light of the following, the court concludes that, prima facie, it has jurisdiction pursuant to Article 9 of the Convention to entertain the case.
Truthfully, I didn't even know they had that, really. I don't think so. I think I saw something like that in Austin Powers once when I was a kid, and I thought it was all a joke, but it's like 15 judges from all over the world, and they're just like, y'all are not doing great stuff right now, Israel. Don't love it, okay? Don't love it. But they stopped short of telling them that they have to stop. You know what I mean? That's what really happened. But right around the 2000s, because we've gotten to 95, Prime Minister of Israel's been shot. Second Intifada comes in, and that really goes from 2000 to 2005. Okay, so yeah, Second Intifada was way more deadly than the first. I mean, the first, I think a couple hundred people died, about 150 or so. At least from the numbers that I'm looking at here, about 5,000 people total died. I think it was about 4,000 Palestinians, give or take, and about 1,000 Israelis. And the numbers might be a little bit skewed because it takes the timeline a little bit after the actual Israeli disengagement that happens in 2005. But that's what we're about to talk about right now, because that's what happens after the Second Intifada. So a lot of people die throughout that time, a lot of fighting back and forth by the two nations, if you will. And then the prime minister, through the Knesset and all that, they propose that all the Israelis that are living in Gaza leave. And there have been a lot of Jewish people living there. They have been settled there for probably since, like we talked about it in 47 and throughout the 50s, when they just came through and started taking those villages. And if you haven't heard that, if you haven't gone back and listened to the other episodes, I would specifically, check out, it's laid out. It's not a lie. You know what I mean? That's what I think what has been told so many times is if you believe anything different than that, you must be making something up. You must be anti-Semitic. No, you really not. There's a documentary that I mentioned in I think it's episode 2, maybe. I think it might be 1 or 2. Or not one, but part 1 or 2. Excuse me. I think it's Tehran. It's been a minute since I've been on to other things, but it's the name of the Palestinian village that was taken over by a specific group of Jews, and the documentary interviews both the people who took over the village and the people who had their village taken from them, and it's horrific kind of what you hear, but you do realize that these places were taken from the Palestinians. And what we're finding actually is that the younger people who are growing up now are seeing these things and finding these stories, even the actual Israeli people. So like what I've been seeing is that not everybody in Israel is on board with the fact that they are just bombing to bits, Gaza. There's been a couple. There's a movie that just came out. It's called Israelism, and it's basically about how there's this super strong movement in America to I wouldn't say brainwash, but to kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, brainwash the Jewish kids in America to want to go to Israel. and fight in the IDF and join the military there, and some of them do that, and then they go over there and they end up being deployed to like Gaza and the West Bank, and they realize that they may have been lied to their entire life about what's actually happening, because they see it with their own eyes, and like they've just, you know what I mean? Maybe it's because they came from America. They have an outside perspective, a different kind of perspective than specifically someone born in Israel. But it's kind of the whole movie is about them kind of like waking up.
I don't think I realized the extent to which what I would come to see on the ground would really shock me and horrify me.
When people look at the West Bank today and say, this is an apartheid system, it's not just throwing out a word.
Palestinians live in, day out, without experiencing a day of freedom.
You see what non-democracy looks like.
What we've been told is that the only way that Jews can be safe is if Palestinians are not safe. The more I learned about that, the more I came to see that as a lie.
It's really wild because, I mean, in addition to that, what I found also while I was doing my research, that there has now been the first Israeli soldier who has been a conscientious objector from this war. He's the first one. He's an 18-year-old kid. I think his name is Tal. And he's actually from America. So it plays into the same thing, like kind of with this movie. Is this he just, he as an Israeli, he's a Jewish, American-born Jewish guy who moved to Israel with his family, so I guess you can call him Israeli. I'm not sure, but he was drafted by the IDF to fight in the war, and he was like, I'm not going to do it, and they put him in jail. And what they do, and I'll let him explain a little bit better, but basically they put him in jail for 30 days, and then he gets redrafted again, basically asking him like, hey, do you want to join the fight to join the war now? And he kind of just keeps saying no.
I got sentenced for 30 days for my first sentencing, and I got another draft order for Monday morning, which means I have to get drafted on Monday morning, where I will go and refuse service once again and probably get sentenced again. And this will happen over and over until someone gives up, until the army gives me an exemption. So I'm being held in a military prison where other soldiers that have committed crimes inside the military and got sentenced to military prison are also being held. It's not a fun experience, but it's also not the worst experience imaginable. It's not like the experience that Palestinian prisoners are being held under in the West Bank or inside Israel.
I never thought that it would get to this point. I thought that everybody in Israel would maintain the same sort of same idea, that they wouldn't, because of what happened. I think I don't know if I would have the power to do what that young kid has done. If I was in Israel, I would certainly have the thoughts, right? I'd be thinking about that, but I don't know. That's power to me. He's just whether you agree with either side, I think for you as a person to stand on what you believe in. But now I'm gonna bring us back to Israel's disengagement from Gaza, which happened in 2005, and this was both popular and not popular at the same time. There are people that did like it, and then there were people that also did not like it. What they did, they offered people money. They even brought in psychologists. They were like, you guys got to get out of here. We're not doing this anymore. And a lot of people left, but some people didn't leave. And they had to be like physically evicted, some of them. The operation was called Operation Giving Brothers a Hand. But I mean, of course, it was written in Hebrew, Yad Achim. I don't know. I'm trying, man. That's what it was called. And so after that, even though they left, right, they pulled their people out, which they pulled out about 8,500 Jewish people. But then they just kind of tightened control over what anybody else was doing in Gaza, because that's what I was saying. Gaza, and it's all policed by the Israelis. If you haven't gone online to look at and see what it really is, or what it really was even before this, that's probably the best thing, because you can look at it now and it's a war zone. It's a war zone now, right? But you look at it before, and it wasn't, which is one thing, but it was also heavily policed by the IDF. You know what I mean? Like I said, these guys are still in refugee camps. They're still in like literal like war camps, because they've been living in a what's the word? I guess a middle ground. I didn't want to say catch-22 because I'm not sure if that quite applies here. Because I mean, I guess it is for them. The catch, you can become your own state, but you kind of have to believe that that other state exists, which they kind of already did. That was one of the things that they got in the Oslo Accords. The PLO agreed to recognize Israel. They could also get, possibly having their own government, but we talked about that didn't really work out. But so now we're going to get to the actual what's happening right now. So that's, because that's the mid 2000s. In this 4-part series, we've covered probably about 1,000 years, trying to understand and figure out that these people have been fighting each other for about 1,000, if not more than that. But we're here now, and so we all know what happened on October 7th. The atrocities, and more stuff has come out. Right? It was a lot. And I watched some more of the videos because I didn't really watch that much stuff about the festival itself when it first came out. I watched a lot of stuff about what was going to happen with the war because people were almost, it was when it happened, everybody was like, we're just so sure a war is going to come. But just know, you just know that. So that's more what I was thinking about, but I hadn't really focused my time too much on the actual festival. And I had gotten some interview footage from some of the people who were there and some of the people who survived. Because truthfully, I didn't know that people survived from that. I thought they killed everybody at that festival, at least, and then more people out there. I didn't know that people actually made it out. I have the woman, Lady in Red, which is, I guess, she become popular on social media, and she describes her experience trying to actually get out, and I'm going to play some of that for you now.
So we being there next to the policeman, and then was a moment that the policeman looked at all of us and just scream, if you want to be safe, you just need to run to the field. It's above the street. We looked one in each other. I want to stay there, and thank God that I didn't.
It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, to think that, to be at a concert and then to be running for your life, to be anywhere and then to be running for your life. That's what's, to be in a grocery store and running for your life. But I couldn't imagine. She talks about getting in the car, and there's this is all video footage too. This is audio that I have, but this video will be on the website. You can go find it on YouTube as well, because it's all recorded. This is all young people. They all have their phones out, so all this is being recorded. And she talks about the moment when I think it's her husband or her boyfriend, one of the two. I think they have a kid together. From watching the entire interview, but I guess she couldn't. She hopped in a car and he couldn't because there's too many people in the car. They locked the car door. Not in some weird way. She's like, or we can't take anybody else. We're trying to get out of here. And they made eye contact.
Then we hear Matan screaming Vlada, I'm here. Let me go to the car. And they just unlocked the door again. Yeah. And I remember Matan's face. At start, he say me goodbye. You understand that's it. We were in a car, 8 people, in a mini Kia Picanto. They take everyone they can.
She didn't know if she'd ever see him again. You know what I mean? It was this whole, it was really felt like a movie. I felt like I was hearing it was like a lot going on. But she would end up seeing him again. Spoiler alert. He got on some old lady, they said, came through and picked him up. I don't know. That's what she said. But that was, a very interesting account to hear. But then we have the other side. Then we have the retaliation. Then we have what came next, right? Which like I said, we all knew was coming. We all knew that Israel was going to do something. And it made sense. It only makes sense. And that's why I agree with, what Bernie was saying. It's, you can't do that and expect that they're not going to do something, right? Because that was crazy. That was wild. But what they're doing now, and you I don't know. It's hard to describe, or it's hard to how can I put this? It's really difficult. It's hard to call out genocide when you see it. I think, and that may be that might be a hot take, or something that might need more explanation. I guess I'm saying because the word gets thrown around so many times, right? Even by the side that possibly is committing a genocide. Israel themselves have said that they felt, I think at times, that in itself was trying to commit a genocide, or that they're always under the threat of a genocide. And I feel like that's relatively hyperbolic, in my opinion, because yes, there was a genocide committed against Jewish people. That is documented. That happened. That was atrocious. 6 million people, right? But that doesn't mean that every time that there's a bad thing done towards Jewish people, that it is in itself a genocide, right? But since it gets thrown around so much, you're like, okay, is this a genocide? What I'm seeing here is killing 30,000 people in response to 1,200 people, and really indiscriminately, because what they say, I think, is 10,000 of those 30,000 people are children. 1 in 3. 10,000 of the 30,000. What they say, I'm not there. I'm in America, but they say 10,000 of those are kids. They say 2/3 are women and children. So I guess the other 10,000 is women. So I mean, only 10,000 of what they're doing, only 1/3 of what they're doing. I don't know. I'm also not a general. I've never run a country. I used to run a restaurant. That didn't go that well. So I don't know. Maybe don't give me a country. I don't know. But there might be another way to do it, is kind of what I'm thinking. Do I have the answer? I wish I did. But I don't know. I don't think the answer is 30,000 people. I don't think the answer is continuing to add to that number. We could, you can't let bygones be bygones, but I'm saying just like, because what's the plan afterwards? That's what you have to think about. That's what I'm sure. I hope, like I said, I think I said this in the last episode. I hope someone's thinking about that, because they basically leveled the entire area. What is it, like 25 square miles of rubble and dead kids, just little dead babies? What do you do after that? You know what the sick thing that I think they probably want to do? Clean it up and just make more settlements. Like, oh yeah, there used to be people here. Because what do you do? Who's going to build that back? How would the Palestinians have enough money to build that back? But they can't do that. Israel doesn't want to do that. The UN's not going to do that. Who's going to do it? All these questions. It's crazy. I mean, I think that the Israelis are, I think they're misguided in what they're doing. I feel like the hostages should be their top priority, should have been. And I think now it's safe to say that it wasn't. I'm not sure if it ever was. I think it was when the first initial, media coverage came out. But ever since then, I truthfully think because you got to wonder, and all right, to a degree, I'm sure it's successful. I'm sure that, I bet they're taking out some people. Like when they say we took out this general or this leader or whatever, I bet that's happening too. But I don't know. I don't know if it's worth. But also, I'm not Israeli. And I didn't have anybody die in that October 7th massacre, because the stories that I've heard, truthfully, which I will not repeat here because they're everywhere else, you can find them, are just atrocious. They are sick and sad. But and I don't and there is no but. There is no but, truthfully. But the reason that I felt like it was necessary to do these multi-part series about this is because what I felt when I heard and saw those things is it's years and years of anger is what I saw, is what I felt. I mean, I just because you don't. War is crazy, but the stuff that they did is, you don't do that without having some sort of real, deep-seated hatred for that person, for that entity, or for that race or nationality, or however they want to classify it. And that's why I felt it was worth going back and saying, well, why are they so mad? And I hope that we uncovered a little bit of that for you. I definitely didn't know, and I can look back and without justifying what happened on October the 7th and say they kind of have a reason to be mad. They definitely have a reason to be mad. it doesn't justify what happened there. But when you go back and look at how many thousands of people on both sides have died in the last 70 to 100 years, it gets muddy as to say who's actually in the right at which time. You know what I mean? Because we covered massacres. We covered massacres in the last episode. I believe it was. Was it the Lod airport massacre, Munich? Those are two different things. But I'm saying, like, we covered both of those. And we just told you now. I mean, about the first and second Intifada. We're talking about thousands of people died. So who was right when they were doing whatever they were doing? What is right is the question. Where are we going to go with it? Is a two-state solution possible? I don't know. But that has been the Israel-Hamas conflict, part 4. Okay, so that was Israel-Hamas part 4. I do think that'll probably end the series. I don't think a part 5 is necessary. I think we really, we dug down deep and it was good. It was one of the first real, I would say, investigative projects for this podcast that I've actually done. I'm glad to have done. I feel like I learned a lot, and I feel like anybody who wants to learn about this stuff, it's there. And on the website is all the works cited for all these different videos and articles that I've read that have given me these opinions, which are clearly just that. Like I said, I've mentioned before, I am not a person who is obviously an authority on any of this. I would like to, in the future, get some people on the podcast who possibly have a little bit more to say about it than I. In the process of reaching out to some people to see if we can have some more intellectual discussions about this stuff, maybe. But we'll see. I hope you guys liked it. As always, htthappen.com for the website, at htthappen for the socials, TikTok at htthappen22. Give us 5 stars if you loved it, 2 stars if you didn't. Tell us why you didn't love it, because constructive criticism is always welcome. And I don't think there's much else to say. Hope you guys liked the episode. Thank you for pressing play, and we'll see you next week with the next bite-sized bio. Oh, wait, one more thing. I am going to play you out with just a little bit more of Bernie Sanders, because I feel like he's just laying it down. He's just telling it like it is. And it's a very interesting perspective, because he's a Jewish senator who has spent time in Israel and has still, just had these are his feelings. And that's why I feel like you have to listen to this stuff. Not you have to, but I mean, it's important, because I don't know. People want to make it seem as if you have any sort of idea or feeling that's outside of the mainstream of Israel can do whatever they want, then you are yourself anti-Semitic. And it's like, I think it's much more nuanced than that. So we'll do a little bit more from that speech that he made in Congress just about a week ago.
Madam President, when we look at what is going on in Gaza now, we must understand that 1.7 million people have been driven from their homes, 85% of the entire population of Gaza. Imagine that, 85% of the population removed from their homes. And then, as a result of Israeli bombardment, 70% of the housing units have been damaged or destroyed. An unprecedented level of destruction.